Welcome to Kids Matter. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin. As a pediatrician, mom, and grandma, I understand how challenging it can be to help our kids grow into their best selves. We are so much more powerful together. Here, I will be sharing the knowledge and wisdom of a wide range of people who understand and care deeply about children. I'm hoping for your input as well, because kids really do matter. They are our future. Welcome back to the Kids Matter podcast. Today, I am super honored and super excited to be here today with Dr. Ross Greene. Dr. Greene is a clinical psychologist and the originator of the innovative, evidence-based approach called Collaborative Proactive Solutions, or CPS, as described in his influential books, The Explosive Child, Lost in School, Lost and Found, Raising Human Beings, and the most recent, which is, I'm showing people on video, The Kids Who Aren't Okay, The Urgent Case for Reimagining Support, Belonging, and Hope in Schools. He also developed and executive produced the award-winning documentary film, The Kids We Lose, from 2018, which is very powerful. I saw that years ago. He was on the faculty at Harvard Medical School for over 20 years and now oversees the nonprofit he founded in 2009, Lives in the Balance. I'm going to link to all of this, which advocates legislatively on behalf of kids with concerning behaviors and their caregivers and provides vast free resources on the CPS model. He also currently is adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology at Virginia Tech and in the Faculty of Science at the University of Technology, Sydney in Australia. So thank you so much for meeting with me and for being patient with me through all of our technical and scheduling glitches.
I'm usually the one with technical and scheduling glitches, so I feel your pain.
No, I really appreciate it, because as you know, we've been trying to do this for years. So for my preceding podcast that I didn't get to do it for. So I'm beyond excited. And I really want to start with, I don't even want to talk about why or who's not okay, because I think that people really get that, right? You do explain it in the book, just in case people don't know. But I loved the quote that you had from Isaac Marion, who wrote these zombie books. Never heard of him before, but he wrote these zombie books. We are where we are, however we got here. What matters is where we go next. So I want to go next. I love how you have solutions, and I want to talk about those solutions. So how can we help our many struggling kids? And also at the same time, help the kids who are fine, because this is what I think of as universal design, right?
The things that people tell me the most about how my work affects their practices is, number one, it focuses not on kids' concerning behavior and trying to modify it. Concerning behavior is just a kid's frustration or distress response, and I wish every caregiver in the world knew that. I'm doing my best. And instead, we're focused on the problems that are causing those behaviors and solving them. That's huge. The other big piece is that when we're focused on behavior, we're focused on what's late. If concerning behavior is a kid's frustration response, then something's already frustrating the kid. So many interventions, behavior modification included, but a lot of crisis management strategies that we continue to teach parents and educators, teach caregivers what to do when it's already late, when a kid is already becoming escalated, when a kid is already out of control, when consequences, which is the prototypical response to a kid's concerning behavior, by definition, consequences are late. They're an event that occurs after the fact. We have got to turn that around. We have got to be consumed with being early. Chapter 3 in the new book is called Set Up to Be Late. And in that chapter, I mentioned the dozens of things we still do in schools, teach educators how to do, that are all responses to kids who are beginning to struggle again over an unsolved problem they've been struggling with for a very long time. If we could do those two things, we'd be in much better shape.
That's all really true. I want you to go in a little bit more about the concept of late and why we're late, what we're doing that's late, just so we can understand.
If you're focused on behavior, you're late, because behavior is simply a signal that a kid is already frustrated over something, right? So much earlier than that, is the expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting that is setting that behavior in motion. Now, I was having a conversation with some colleagues last week about there are things that are even earlier than that, but like how you manage your classroom in general, how you prepare for what you already know about your students and what expectations you place upon them. So there's even earlier than this, the when a kid is having difficulty meeting an expectation, but that's when the CPS model tends to kick in, right? When a kid is having trouble meeting an expectation. The good news is, once again, it's probably not the first time the kid has had difficulty meeting that expectation. It's probably the 187th. Begging the question, why are we still stuck in the heat of the moment, yet again, with this kid over an expectation they've been having difficulty meeting for a very long time? Now, what might some of those expectations be? It tends to be pretty mundane stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
At home, it could be difficulty brushing teeth before going to bed at night, difficulty getting off the PlayStation to come in for dinner, difficulty being in bed by 9 p.m. with the lights and electronics off. That's a mere smattering. At school, it could be difficulty coming in from recess, difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math, difficulty coming to school. Once again, only a smattering. But that's what I mean by unsolved problems. Those are the kinds of expectations that set in motion concerning behavior in kids who are prone to concerning behavior. Here's the good news. Those expectations can be identified proactively, because once again, this is not the first time the kid has had difficulty meeting that expectation. That means they can be solved proactively way before we ever find ourselves in the heat of the moment on that unsolved problem the next time.
I really like that reframing, but I want to also talk about the concept of skills that are lagging, because I know you talk about both unsolved problems, which you've just given examples of, but lagging skills. Can the kid do the thing?
We'll find out if the kid can meet the expectation. That's a judgment call, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we talk about a lot in the CPS model is expectation management, which is really giving conscious thought to whether a kid can actually meet a particular expectation at this point in their development. You know, there's a lot of caregivers who are of the belief that if a kid is simply motivated enough, they can do anything. Not true, right? There are a lot of caregivers who believe that if they just push hard enough, are enthusiastic enough,
Mm-mm.
the kid is capable of anything. Those things are not true. And in fact, pushing harder is a very good way to elicit a frustration response in a kid. One of the things we also talk about in the CPS model is developmental variability, which I don't hear people talking about anywhere nearly enough.
Mm-mm. They
Uh,
have to.
Basically, it says every kid's different.
Right.
That's what's walking in a classroom. That's what we have in households.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that means that the definition of good parenting and good teaching is meeting every kid where they're at. Skills. What we know about skills is that there are certain skills that help us human beings respond well to problems and frustrations. The global skills, there's dozens of them, include things like flexibility,
Mm-hmm.
adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation. What does the research that has accumulated over the last 40 to 50 years tell us about kids with concerning behavior? Kids with over the top frustration responses, they're struggling with those skills. Now, that, of course, is quite different from what a lot of caregivers have been believing for a very long time, and that is that the reason these kids are exhibiting concerning behavior is because they're poorly motivated. That leads us to rewarding and punishing kids. It's because they just want their way. They're coercing us into capitulating to their wishes. I find that those things fall by the wayside when we recognize what the research has been telling us for 40 or 50 years. Kids with maladaptive frustration responses are definitely struggling with certain skills. Here's where life can get interesting. There are also caregivers who, the minute you tell them a kid is struggling with skills, feel that it is their mission to teach those skills. Yes, It would be good if we enhanced those skills. But there are some skills that are a whole lot more easily taught through direct instruction, through a curriculum than others. And flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation, things I find people spending an enormous amount of time trying to teach through direct instruction. I find that that doesn't always really get us there. What is going to get us there early on? Solving the problems that are causing a kid's
Exactly.
behavior, right? And that can be fairly rapid. But a lot of people come to this model with the mentality, no, the skills have to be taught before this kid starts to do better. Wrong. Skill enhancement is baked into the problem solving process. So the primary goal of this model is to solve the problems that are causing a kid's concerning behavior. There's one word we haven't mentioned yet. We know that the problem solving is supposed to be proactive, made possible by the fact that the unsolved problems are highly predictable and can be identified proactively, but the problem solving is also collaborative, meaning the kid is an integral, indispensable part of the problem solving process. We find that when we are solving problems collaboratively and proactively with kids, not only do the problems get solved and we get fairly rapid behavioral improvement, but over time, the skills are enhanced. So I don't encourage people, as it relates to the skills we're talking about with these kids, to primarily focus on skill enhancement. The skills will be enhanced by solving problems collaboratively and proactively with kids. That's a bias that sometimes doesn't serve us very well when we are leading with skill enhancement. The skills will be enhanced over time because the skills we're talking about, the ones we've already named, those take a while. Solving the problems that are causing a kid's concerning behaviors, that can be very rapid.
That's amazing. That is such an amazing reframing of how we're doing things, because we're really right now, we're so focused on the academics. And even if you have social emotional curriculum, it's being taught, like you said, like an academic curriculum directly as opposed to experientially. It makes so much sense. How do we change this? Please.
We get the word out as we are doing now. We keep writing books. I tend not to write books unless I have something new to say. And the angle on this book, the thing that was new, was just the astounding percentage of kids who are struggling these days. And by the way, it's not most.
True.
It's a lot more than ever, right?
Yeah.
And we see that in these very high rates of depression and anxiety and concerning behavior and suicidality and chronic school absenteeism. All the while, we keep becoming more punitive in our schools, zero tolerance policies be an excellent example of that. We keep ramping up the pressure, high stakes testing being a good example of that, right? Schools are not the safe havens we wish they were. School shootings be an example of that.
And bullying, yeah.
And bullying. So chapter 1 goes through all the things that have occurred over the last 2 or 3 decades that have made it harder to be a kid. I wanted to talk about that because people are sort of grappling right now. What do we do with all these kids who are struggling? And we talked about that first. Why are there more kids struggling? As you said, we don't have to belabor that. We just know that there are. A lot of people blame COVID, and I'm one who says that COVID didn't help, but all of these trends were in motion.
It just put fuel to the fire. It was there already,
Right.
100%. I mean, you could blame smartphones and digital media and stuff like that. You could. I mean, they're just all pieces of societal changes.
They
that-
are. I think this is slightly controversial, but Lives in the Balance, the nonprofit I founded, did a summit a few weeks ago that people can still watch if they get on the website.
Yeah.
On social media and electronics. And we had someone from Jonathan Haidt's shop telling us how bad it is. And then we had someone named Jen Lumenland, who has taken the time to read every single study published on the effects of social media on kids. And the summit is very much worth watching because the effect size of social media and electronics on kids' mental health is actually rather small.
No.
Yes. The kids who are most adversely affected in terms of their mental health are the kids who are vastly overusing it. That's why the summit is so worth watching. We lead
Wow.
with Jean Twenge, who is
Hmm.
from Jonathan Haidt's shop. And it's not that what they're saying isn't valid. It's just that, in my view, and when we see the data that are presented, it's hard not to come to this conclusion. It's way overstated. Doesn't mean we should
Mm,
ignore it. Doesn't, whether banning it, which of course is adult instinct, right?
right.
Whether banning it is the way to go, I have my doubt. It's very hard to
Hmm.
enforce. And the first ones out of the gate to do that, the Australians are not seeing much success with it. The Brits just did it a day or two ago. We may end up doing it. I hope not, because I think we could be putting our energies in places that are much more productive.
100%. And we know already that authoritarian parenting is not a good style, right? We're doing authoritarian parenting on this.
We
Why?
just we keep because under duress, that's where us adults head.
It's knee jerk.
Um,
It's knee jerk. Shut it
well,
down. Close it out,
zero
right? But
zero tolerance policies are a good example of that.
right,
Zero
exactly.
tolerance policies were a response to Columbine, and as scary as school shootings are, and I'm not underplaying that, that's a big deal, not just for kids, but for educators. Tightening the vice grip is only going to make things worse, and did.
And that also impacted on the anti-bullying policies, which the evidence shows they don't work. They
Being
don't.
unilateral on bullying definitely
Yes.
doesn't.
The zero tolerance policies do not work. And
Correct.
I've already been doing podcasts on this, and I'm working on a collaborative model for conflict resolution similar to yours. What we're missing in our kids is those soft skills, or the skills we were talking about that they need to learn through your model, right? That will be
And
what we should focus on, but we're not.
what we're often missing, given adult instinct, is the kid. And I've been doing some interviews for this thing we're doing in Massachusetts to get rid of restraint and seclusion. And we're interviewing people in schools who've managed to dramatically reduce or eliminate the use of restraint and seclusion in their schools. And one of the things they're saying the most is, one of the most revelatory things about the CPS model is that it involves talking to kids. That's revelatory is a sad statement on adults.
Right. I mean, the definition of insanity. It's we keep doing what doesn't work. I'm laughing, but it's really sad. It's really sad. And I want to talk about how we can be early. But before we do that, I just want to throw hugs out there to both parents and teachers and people who work in schools, because both in school and at home, it's really, really hard. We don't have the framework set up, except for people lucky enough to have your model.
The book could just as easily have been called The Educators Who Aren't Okay, because there's a lot of educators who are not feeling okay these days. They are very overstretched. They are very burned out. That's something a lot of the people we've been interviewing are telling us. And it's my personal and professional experience as well. Apparently, being punitive and exclusionary and unilateral isn't working out so well for the adults either. So it's a shame that that's where a lot of our models come from. That's not where this model comes from.
Right. And not just that, but we are so hyper focused, like you said, on the high stakes testing. And we have the inclusion model. So you have teachers with kids, all kinds of skill levels, right? The developmental variability has stretched beyond capacity. And I understand why it's reactive rather than proactive.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go full bore on inclusion, and I'd rather that than the alternative, then you've got to ease up on high stakes testing. The two, it's very hard to get the two to go together, especially when a lot of what's being said to educators is that you can get every kid over the same line by the end of the school year
Which is
if you're
ridiculous.
a good enough teacher. It's insanity.
It really is, because sometimes what they're doing is they're modifying the curriculum to the point of meaninglessness while the kid is having these problems that you're not solving, while the kid is not building the skills because you're not involving the kid.
The definition of good teaching is meeting every kid where they're at. And
Exactly.
as hard as that might be, and by the way, that's not revolutionary. that I'm not first out of the gate on that by any stretch of the imagination. Differentiated instruction is an example of meeting every kid where they're at. Special ed law is an attempt at meeting every kid where they're at. So this is not novel. Many people think it's very hard to meet every kid where they're at. My motto is it's a whole lot harder not to meet every kid where
Right.
they're at. And that's what we're seeing when we're trying to get every kid over the same line by the end of the school year. Every kid should be their own reference point for progress. And
Exactly.
some school systems are moving in that direction, just not enough quickly enough.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, your motto, kids do well if they can. You might be tired of hearing it, but you are famous all over the world for that most important line, kids do well if they can. So we're setting these kids up to not do well. We're just setting them
Uh,
up that way by setting them up by having this expectation that they meet this high stakes testing regardless of their developmental variability.
that is correct.
And we need to remove that for your model to work, for any change to make that's positive. We can't have both.
Well, you can have there's a lot of schools that are implementing the model that still have high stakes testing, so they live with it. They do their best, but it would be better if they had permission to have every kid be their own reference point for progress. That's the line that's at the beginning. Where is this kid? How do we meet them where they're at so that they can make the maximum amount of progress over the course of this school year? That is a very different approach than saying every kid has to get over this line by the end of the school year. It does not take into account developmental variability. It is not meeting kids where they're at. So you got to decide what line you're paying attention to, right? This line over here is every kid. You got to get over that line by the end of the school year. This line over here, meeting kids where they're at and every kid being their own reference point, we're going to make a whole lot more progress that way.
We will, but everybody has to be realistic of where that kid is at. I think one of the problems is lack of understanding of where that kid is, whether it's the parents, whether it's the school, whether it's them together in a sort of denial, joint denial.
I think that a lot of educators have been forced to be paranoid about selling kids short. In some circles, you are selling a kid short if you do not believe that they can get over this line by the end of the school year. My mantra is you're not selling anybody short. You're meeting every kid where they're at. And you're going to make a whole lot more progress that way.
Exactly. But it's also the priority should be building the skills that are deficient, right? I'd rather see a kid not meeting the metrics, but becoming less frustrated with being met where they were at.
No question about it.
It sounds obvious, but that's not what's happening. And that's what's making it so difficult for educators.
No question about it.
And I don't think that every kid can be in the mainstream. I think we have a whole menu of options, and the kid is supposed to be in the least restrictive environment, but that might not be the mainstream class. It's difficult.
I think that almost every kid can be in the mainstream if we're meeting them where they're at. It's going to look a lot worse for kids who are struggling if we put them in the mainstream and say, you've got to get over this line by the end of the school year. That has nothing to do with where you're starting. That part makes no sense whatsoever.
Maybe it's more a matter of really meeting them where they're at than looking at the
Totally.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you put them in a different placement, then you're saying somebody else will meet them where they're at. If you can equip general ed teachers and support them in meeting kids where they're at in a general ed classroom, that's doable the vast majority of the time under those conditions.
Yes, if all things line up, I see that. So I really want to talk about your way of being early. I want to go into that whole model of collaborative problem solving, please.
Yep. Being early means identifying every expectation a kid is having difficulty meeting. Using an instrument that people can find on the Lives in the Balance website. It's called the Assessment of Skills and Unsolved Problems, or ASIP. It's how we help caregivers get out in front of all those expectations a kid is having difficulty meeting, because we're identifying them proactively. And by getting in front of the unsolved problems, you are way getting in front of a kid's frustration responses. When we identify problems proactively, we can solve them proactively. Solved problems don't cause frustration responses. Only unsolved problems do. But the only caveat there is you're not going to be able to solve them all at once because kids who've been struggling for a long time tend to have a lot of unsolved problems. So some are going to have to be put on hold, at least for now. Many people hear that through the filter of giving in. No, there's no giving in this model. Giving up, no giving up in this model. Prioritizing, yes, prioritizing is part of this model because you're not going to be able to solve everything at once. It took a long time for that pile of unsolved problems to accumulate. It's going to take a minute to get through them. The other reason you would put an expectation on hold, by the way, for now, is because of a concept we mentioned earlier, expectation management. Don't even think that expectation is in range for this kid at this point in this kid's development. We're not talking about all third graders. We're talking about this kid.
Mhm.
We're not talking about this kid's brother when he was in third grade. We're talking about this kid. We're not talking about the parents when they were in third grade. We're talking about this kid and what they're capable of. And that's a judgment call, by the way. I'd be the first to admit that. Here's my simple and imperfect algorithm for making that decision. If a kid can meet an expectation sometimes, it's in range. If a kid is never meeting a particular expectation at this point in their development, I think you're probably safe in concluding that we're not there yet. So expectation management is another reason to put expectations on hold. In some of the kids that I work with, stabilization is our top priority. We're not going to get any teaching done as long as this kid is unstable. And in fact, putting expectations on this kid that we already know they can't meet is only going to destabilize them further. Why would we do that? So putting expectations on hold for now is a very stabilizing thing to do. We can add those expectations back once this kid is stable, but stabilization comes before education.
That makes so much sense. Now, I don't hear you talking about lagging skills. Is that not the focus?
Skills are the focus as it relates to why this kid has such a maladaptive frustration response. We'll find out what's making it hard for the kid to meet the expectation when we engage them in the problem-solving process. So we do not automatically assume that a kid is having difficulty agreeing on the rules of the Foursquare game with Billy at recess because of skills. Skills, or the lack of them, explain maladaptive frustration responses. We are completely open-minded when it comes to what's making it hard for a kid to meet a particular expectation. And who's our number one source of information on that?
The kid.
Kid. I don't want to make any assumptions about what's making it hard for the kid to meet an expectation. I am paying attention to the research on skills as it relates to explaining why the kid has a maladaptive frustration response. That's where the skills come in.
So what you're saying is you're going to focus on the behavior because you don't know why until you talk to the kid.
You're going to focus on the unsolved problems that are causing...
the unsolved problems. Sorry, not the behavior.
Right.
Maybe you want to elaborate because I read the book, but people who didn't need to understand the difference. I made a boo-boo. Explain, please.
That's not an inconsequential boo-boo.
I know.
No, but you know what? It's not uncommon either. No, instead of focusing on the behavior, we're focusing on the unsolved problems that are causing them, right? And we're not making any assumptions about what's making it hard for the kid to meet those expectations. We're going to ask the kid. This is an ask the kid model. And one of my favorite lines when people ask me, what makes you think the kid knows what's making it hard for them to meet the expectation? My favorite line is 35 years of asking.
And we just don't in general, which is bad.
Number one, we focus on the behavior instead of the problems that are causing it. Number two, that makes us late instead of early. And number three, us adults are trained. Those of us who were trained, even those of us who were not trained, but those of us who were trained to know. And so us adults got a bad case of divining what's getting in a kid's way and divining what the solution ought to be. This is a collaborative model. In this model, the kid is going to help you understand what's making it hard for them to meet an expectation. I'm always telling caregivers, Be prepared for surprises when you learn that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's
Right.
way. And kids are indispensable when it comes to helping us come up with solutions that are actually going to work a whole lot better to collaborate with them than for us adults to come up with ingenious solutions based on our preconceived notions. Those solutions don't tend to work very well.
I hear you, but what is the role of the lagging skills? And I'm thinking of emotional regulation, frustration tolerance. Like a lot of these kids do have actual problems with that.
They are
What is
struggling
the
with
role of
skills.
that in this model?
That explains their maladaptive frustration response. In other words, I distinguish between lucky and unlucky frustration responses.
Hmm.
Lucky frustration responses are things like crying and pouting and sulking and withdrawing. Those are called lucky because those frustration responses tend to elicit empathy, nurturance, and support from caregivers. Unlucky frustration responses, screaming, swearing, hitting, kicking, biting, throwing, destroying, running, those frustration responses tend to elicit the most punitive exclusionary disciplinary practices our society has to offer and tend to elicit far less empathy, nurturance, and support. What explains why some kids have lucky frustration responses and others have unlucky frustration responses? Skills. Skills like flexibility, adaptability, frustration tolerance, problem solving, emotion regulation.
But does it help to be paying attention and listing those, or is that not really the focus of the model?
It helps to have those lenses on because I like that a whole lot better than thinking this kid's frustration responses is volitional, intentional, purposeful, coercive, attention seeking, due to poor parenting.
Hmm.
This is interesting. I was trained in the poor parenting tradition. I was trained to believe, as many were, that kids with concerning behavior, the reason they had concerning behavior was because their parents were passive, permissive, inconsistent, non-contingent,
Mm.
inept disciplinarians. What changed my mind when I discovered that the vast majority of parents of ill-behaved kids also had well-behaved kids in their homes?
Right.
That'll change things up on you, right? So what does explain why a kid has a maladaptive frustration response? What the research has been telling us for 40 or 50 years. Skills. Some of us got them, some of us don't. Some of us, given human diversity, all human beings, no human being gets off scot-free. We're all struggling with skills in some domain or another, right? As an example, math is not my strong suit, right? I like to think that I write well,
You do.
but there's a good reason I'm not an accountant, right?
Right.
Math is not my strong suit, right? I was able to manage even though I had that area of lagging skills. There's a whole bunch of skills people don't think about as often, the ones we've been talking about so far.
Right.
It's when kids are struggling with those skills, they are highly likely to have maladaptive frustration responses. It is critical that us caregivers know that is about skills and not motivation. We have a huge project going on in Ireland right now where they are implementing CPS in their child and adult disability services, soon to be coming to Irish schools. And they asked me, my colleagues over there said, what's your 5-year goal for Ireland? And I said, for every adult in Ireland to know that maladaptive frustration responses are about skills, not motivation. That's absolutely far and away number one. That's where skills come in answer to your question.
But again, back to the collaborative problem solving, the way you build the skills is not by directly teaching them. I think that's a really important idea because I don't think everybody understands that.
The way you build the skills is by engaging kids in the problem solving process. That's how they become more flexible and adaptable. That's how they
Exactly.
tolerate frustration. That's how
I
they
think,
learn to problem solve.
yes, I think they also learn by modeling, though.
Well, I think that they learn by modeling. The thing is, we've been teaching adults how to self-regulate. If that's the modeling we're talking about, okay, but now we're still stuck in the heat of the moment. This is a very interesting question, though. What skill is more important as it relates to regulating one's emotions? Having the skills to regulate one's emotions when a problem has already popped up, or having the skills to solve problems so that you can, number one, solve them proactively in
Right.
anticipation of them coming up, or even if we find ourselves in the heat of the moment, what's going to see us through? Our ability to solve the problem that has just popped up on our radar screen, or our ability to regulate our emotions because a problem has just popped up on our radar screen? Very interesting discussion point. I would choose problem solving.
Yes.
You can self-regulate till the cows come home. The problem is still there.
Right. Not just that, but the adult is an adult. And they may never have had the same regulation problems anyway. So it's lovely, right? But it's like watching an Olympic skier. You can't ski like that Olympic skier just because they can.
Well, many of the adults who I've worked with over the years who had the hardest time with a kid who became dysregulated in the face of a problem, most of those adults were folks who had no difficulty staying regulated in the midst of a problem, which meant their kid was a completely foreign object to them. They had
Right.
no idea how come their kid couldn't do this. I'd rather have them knowing that that's about skills than having them thinking that's about motivation. Motivation's going to send them in the wrong direction.
100%. But also then there's parents who also have regulation problems, and that's a separate issue.
It
You need
is.
to work on
And here's the
yourself
interesting
too.
thing. We want to get those caregivers out of the heat of the moment too.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend most of my time teaching those caregivers what to do once they find themselves in the heat of the moment. I want to help those caregivers know what to do so they don't find themselves in the heat of the moment in the first place. That's what this model is all about.
What should they do in the heat of the moment?
What should they do?
In the heat of the moment. Yeah.
Take a break. Ask yourself, did I just get surprised here? Is this a new unsolved problem that we're about to go down the rabbit hole on yet again? The likelihood is that the answer to that question is absolutely not. Then why are we going down the rabbit hole again on this one? It must not be solved yet. Let's solve it, because this one time, given that there's 197 times that preceded it on the same unsolved problem, I think we're going to be okay if we take a break and try to solve it proactively instead of trying to do it in the heat of the moment.
And you cannot do this in the heat of the moment.
You can try. It's not as effective in the heat of the moment. I'll take it over threatening punishment.
I see. But I think you want everyone to be calmer to do this, to collaborate.
We want people solving problems collaboratively and proactively. That's the secret sauce.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. Now, I just want to clarify that this book is really focused on schools, right? The Kids Who Aren't Okay is written to educators, correct?
It is. A lot of parents are getting a lot out of that book because parents are late too. It's just that particular book.
Right. So that's what I wanted to have you
educate.
point out, that this is for parents as well. And if parents did it at home, it would make it so much easier, I think.
It would. There's no reason for us to be stuck in the heat of the moment. The reason we find ourselves stuck in the heat of the moment is because we keep finding ourselves stuck in the heat of the moment, and problems don't get solved in the heat of the moment, generally speaking.
Exactly. And now I used the book, The Explosive Child, for so many years. I have used it for my own family, for families in my practice as a pediatrician. The collaborative problem solving is really a more advanced version of the A basket, B basket, C basket from The Explosive Child, correct?
I now call the model collaborative and proactive solutions, which is a long story we don't need to take time on.
Oh, no, sorry.
If it's collaborative problem solving with small letters, I think I'm still allowed to use it, but no, the original name of the model was taken from me, we might say.
Yeah, I know.
But not worth spending.
Yes. Collaborative, proactive solutions. Let's say that. Collaborative, proactive solutions.
Say solving problems collaboratively. And
there you go.
That can be in small letters, that can be in capital letters. We can do anything we want with solving problems collaboratively. But what was your question?
So that is something that was similar to the approach of the A basket, B
Oh
basket,
yeah,
C basket
same
from the
thing.
explosive child. I loved that because A basket is you must do this, you must wear your seatbelt in the car. The C basket is, oh my gosh, with these kids, let things slide that don't need to be battled. And then the B basket was the collaborative, proactive, problem solving. Correct?
We can just say solving problems collaboratively, and
It's the
none of us
same
will get
thing,
in
though.
trouble.
It's the
Right.
same thing.
Same exact thing. But what you're pointing out is what I talked about in the explosive child was that caregivers have three options for handling unsolved problems. Plan A is where they're solving the problem unilaterally. Plan B is where they're solving the problem collaboratively. Nothing to be lost by solving the problem collaboratively. Instead, everything to be gained. In fact, Plan A causes concerning behavior in kids who are prone to concerning behavior, which makes no sense because we're trying to reduce concerning behavior. Here's an interesting paradox that I sometimes point out. Who gets more Plan A thrown at them than any other type of kid? The kids who are having the hardest time with it. I guess that's adults saying eventually they'll get the message. Actually, they've gotten the message. You want them to meet that expectation, and you don't approve of their concerning behavior. So let's stop trying to get the message through. Let's start finding out what's getting in the kid's way. One of the people I interviewed, or at least I was editing film this week, one of the educators said, CPS has us focused on what's getting in a kid's way rather than on finding a way to make the kid meet an expectation. That is a very good way to put it. And Plan C is what we were talking about with temporarily putting expectations on hold, at least for now. And once again, you would do that for one of three reasons: prioritizing, because you can't work on everything at once; expectation management. Can this kid actually meet this expectation at this point in their development? Their development. And stabilization. So it's a very simple three option framework that has served many caregivers well, especially they're getting permission to put some expectations on hold for now. They didn't need my permission for that, but a lot of parents get very queasy when they think about putting an expectation on hold. If your kid is having difficulty meeting a lot of expectations, you're going to have to put some on hold. You're not going to be able to solve them all at once, and some of them are going to be out of range at this point in your kid's development. But A versus B is a very nice dichotomy for people because it helps people understand you can get this problem solved collaboratively with the full involvement of the kid. You don't have to be unilateral. It's just that many adults didn't know that Plan B was an option. They've never heard anything about it.
Yeah, Plan B is the key here. Right?
Say that again.
Plan B is the key. If you don't do
Plan B is
Plan
the key.
B, you're just
And
picking your battles. That's all
for
you're
some
doing.
kids, truth is, I don't love picking your battles because there's no battling in this model.
Right.
Plan
Exactly.
A is about battling. Plan A is going to cause battles. Plan B is not about battling. Plan C is not about battling. So I actually don't even think of this as a pick your battles model. This is
No,
a
it isn't.
prioritizing model.
If you don't have B, then you're just picking your battles.
If you don't have B, then you're either causing concerning behaviors because you're being unilateral. And I've seen that, of
Right.
course. Often that's what's walking in the door in my office or what's sitting in school suspension in schools. But some adults, because they think A is their only option and that they don't want to do A anymore because they don't want to cause any more concerning behaviors, what they do is they drop everything. Now, notice I'm being careful about calling that Plan C because Plan C actually isn't about dropping everything.
Correct. That's
And
the
it's
case.
actually not about dropping, it's about putting expectations on hold for now. And although that sounds a little picky, the nuance is actually important of the
Yes.
difference. Yeah, if you don't know about Plan B, you don't have great options.
Exactly. And Plan B, this is all about authoritative parenting. And what we're dancing around is the fear of permissive parenting, right? Or the fear of just giving in and letting the kid run the show.
This is true. Another interview that I did a few weeks ago, the interviewer kept going back to please tell me that plan B isn't going to spoil a kid. And I thought, interesting, right? Spoiling, I think, means the kid gets everything their way. When you're doing plan B, there's 3 steps. Step number 1 is you're finding out what's making it hard for a kid to meet the expectation. But step number 2 is helping the kid understand why you feel it's important that the expectation be met. And step number 3 is where you're coming up with a solution together that addresses the concerns of both parties. Number 1, how's that giving in? How's that spoiling anybody? I don't get it. But there's a lot of people who are paranoid about spoiling or giving in to a kid. There's no giving in or spoiling in this model. So it's fascinating to me that I think that's people who are listening with certain filters on.
I think it's people with an authoritarian mindset that if you're not in control, you're letting the kid run the show. And that's not true, but that's the fear.
Other options. It's not either or.
And it's not permissive. I mean, if everything you were giving on everything, not just putting it on hold, if everything was the C basket, that would fall into the category of permissive parenting. And we know that's not good either. So I think there's a fear of that.
Yes. Remember, though, on hold is strategic. In this model, putting things on hold is very strategic. It could be about stabilizing. This kid is just not in a state of mind that permits them to meet any expectations right now. To me, spoiling means the kid gets anything they want. I don't actually think that fits into any of the 3 plans.
I'm not loving the word spoiling. I'm still focusing on the idea that we need to remove all expectations as also a maladaptive response, that kids need to grow.
Yes. The only kids who we would be removing all expectations for are kids who are at a level of instability that it's just unrealistic for them to meet any expectations right now. And that's not the very vast majority of kids. Right. But we do want to have that option for kids who are that unstable, because we got to get them back on their feet again before they're going to meet any expectations. But that is a very different animal than being permissive. Once again, that's strategic plan C.
Exactly. Is this model usable for all kids, like all levels of functioning?
That's who we've applied the model to. The model changes most dramatically, but not in terms of the 3 steps. It's going to be the same 3 steps for non and minimally speaking kids. I don't like selling any kid short. And it is kids of very high support needs and kids who are non and minimally speaking that I find we sell short most often. We are always, as aggressively as possible, finding a way for the kid to participate in whatever way possible in the problem-solving process. Otherwise, what we're basically saying about that kid is we are relegating them to a future solely of adults telling them what to do and making them do it. That's completely adult-driven. And if we're listening to the voices of the neurodivergent community, and we should, and of course that represents a very wide spectrum, but if we listen to the voices of the neurodivergent community, those are among the folks who have been most outspoken about the harms of being unilateral and being completely adult-driven. So those voices have had a very big impact on many people, perhaps especially, but not solely related to kids who we often exclude from the problem-solving process unnecessarily.
I am so glad that you said that. I am so grateful. And I'm so grateful for this chance to finally meet you and interview you. And I'm so grateful for all the amazing work you're doing. Really, thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been a fun ride, and seldom do I take stock of whether I've done any good in this world, but I certainly hope so.
Oh, you have. Thank you so much, and just keep doing it. Don't stop.
I will not stop till I drop.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me to do this.
Oh, thank you for doing it with me.
Thank you for listening to Kids Matter. Raising healthy, happy children takes a village, and I'm grateful you're part of ours. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with another parent, grandparent, teacher, or anyone who cares about kids. Together, we can build the supportive community our children deserve. I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future topics at kidsmatterpodcast@gmail.com with no exclamation point. Your voice truly matters. Until next time, keep advocating for the children in your life because kids really do matter. They are our future. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin, and this has been Kids Matter. Please note that while I am a pediatrician, I am not your child's pediatrician. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. For any medical concerns or decisions, please reach out to your child's healthcare professional.